So here we are. We're at uud.lib dot University of Michigan, umich.edu. And I just wanted to read this to you. It's fairly, I mean, it's not really long, but it's fairly long. And just wanted to to show this as as it pertains to Mr. Abraham Lincoln. And if he's the enemy of your enemy, that doesn't necessarily make him your friend or an ally, but it makes him an asset, one that is usable. Um, Many people will tell you that Abraham Lincoln hated black people, vehement racist, so on and so forth. Once again, from my point of view, my perspective, a man who will say that the guy had mixed genetics, and any man who was sensible, who's coming from a background where he's not full white, the best thing he could do is distance himself from those people. But as we read this, just understand that this is not for that. This is to read what I wanted to say about the Lincoln laws and why they killed Abraham Lincoln. And this is important as far as the enemy of my enemy is concerned. Politicians, in their speeches, writings, and actions, must, as Kansas Senator Nancy Kassenbaum recently stated, strike the proper balance between naive idealism and craven pragmatism. Abraham Lincoln was a politician who understood that political action is compromise. But the highest calling of the expert, successful politician is making compromise creative and not corruptive. It is proper that successful politicians have always wanted to be both popular and political. Being popular is easier. It is accomplished by telling audiences what they want to hear, something that touches at a responsive chord because it is consonant with their own personal experiences and beliefs. Being political is more difficult. It requires telling people what the politicians want them to hear in a way that will be inspired to think differently and more sensitively about things. As we consider Lincoln, the successful leader and politician dealing with the civil rights of Negroes, let us ask two questions. How much did he tell the people what they want to hear? How much did he give them? How much did he give them a new sense of direction? Did he strike a proper balance between idealism and pragmatism? I believe he did. Arthur Zilversmith and Lincoln on Black and White, a documentary history, pulled together many of the documents one needs to answer the questions of Lincoln's views on race. In that volume, and in his recent paper, Lincoln and the Problem of Race, he set an appropriate tone on the issue of race. But I want to focus in particular on Lincoln's actions and, and words on civil rights for the Negro. As I do, I am reminded that the distinguished scholar James Randall, looking at the constitutional aspects of Lincoln's policies, explained that much of the constitutional reasoning of those days were mere rationalizing. Now, as any politician or lawyer can tell you, much of the legal argument of leaders at any time is not mere but pure rationalizing. And in order to understand the rationalizing, one must determine the case a politician or lawyer is trying to make and not linger over much on the language of the arguments. I find much to applaud in Randall's approach to history. Like Randall, I believe it's more insightful to ask how Lincoln's approach to civil war shaped our constitutional understanding than to ask how the Constitution limited policy alternatives available to Lincoln. The really exciting constitutional inquiries, I believe, are finding out how adept the fathers were in picking and choosing from the Constitution's different rationales, and then ascertaining the purposes of the arguments and analyzing the social effects of their goals. Whatever argument evolved became accretions and a part of the constitutional wisdom to be passed along. The real task then is not choosing between believing the politicians, is not choosing between that politicians meant what they said about the Constitution and ignoring what they said, but analyzing both what they said and what they did in order to come up with interpretations of both. This is what we must do in considering Lincoln and the issue of civil rights for the Negro. What seems remarkable to me is that some of the constitutional historians, constitutional history is, after all, the history of public law, would not understand that point. When dealing with the public utterances, successful politicians can be counted on to be reflecting or molding public opinion. Be careful if a politician tells you in a speech that the reason he will not do something or another is because it is unconstitutional. For example, if an administration official tells you he cannot support tuition tax for parents whose children go to private schools, and then he even has an opinion on the attorney general that tells him tax credit would violate the constitutional wall of separation between church and states, be suspicious. Remember that opinions of the attorney general do not have the force of law, and the attorney general and the administration officials are political appointees of a president whose policy is against tuition tax credits. Ask the administration official why he does not want them, and he may in confidence give you a plethora of reasons, but mostly he thinks tax credits are too expensive and prefers to spend the money on public education. All you really know from his public statements is that he does not want tuition tax credits. Only if he tells you in privacy of his living room or in a private letter, for example, only if he has no reason to want to persuade you that he does not believe by any stretch of constitutional interpretation that he can justify tax credits, do you have reason to believe that he really feels hemmed in by the Constitution? Any successful politician is smart enough to know that he or she can gain more support by arguing the unconstitutionality of a policy to a group with an opposing view than by simply telling them what they want is too expensive. Only unsuccessful politicians fail to understand that necessity, but they do not last too long anyway. That is not to say that politicians lack personal principles, preferences, or constitutional beliefs. Most do have them. It is just that the successful ones adapt their principles and preferences to the times and the constituencies. Successful politicians are neither naive idealists nor craven pragmatists. Um, Now, consistent with these perspectives on the ingredients for success as a politician and the role of constitutional argument in politics, what did Lincoln, who was not an altogether unsuccessful politician, say about the civil rights for the Negro? What did he do and why and how did he add to our constitutional and political wisdom? What he said is well known to scholars and Lincoln buffs in a speech at Peoria, Illinois, on October 6, 1854. Free them and make them politically and socially our equals? My own feelings will not admit of this, and if mine would, we well know that those of great mass of white people will not. Whether this feeling accords with justice and sound judgment is the sole question. If indeed it is any part of it, a universal feeling, whether well or ill founded, cannot be safely disregarded. We cannot then make them equals. In attacking slavery, let it not be said that I'm contending for the establishment of political or social equality between whites and blacks. I have already said the contrary. In a Springfield speech on June 26, 1857, Lincoln stated, "Now I protest against the counterfeit logic that concludes that because I do not want a black woman for a slave, I must necessarily want her for a wife. I need not have her for either. I can just leave her alone. In some respects, she certainly is not my equal, but in her natural rights to eat bread she earns with her own hands without asking leave of anyone else, she is my equal, and the equals of all others." Furthermore, he said, as he understood the intention of the authors of Declaration of Independence, they do not mean to assert the obvious untruth that all were then actually enjoying equality, nor yet that they were about to confer it immediately upon them. They simply they meant simply to declare the right so. that the enforcement of it might follow as fast as circumstances should permit. They meant to set up a standard maxim for free society, which should be familiar to all and revered by all, constantly looked to and constantly labored for, and even though never perfectly attained, constantly approximated, and thereby constantly spreading and deepening its influence and augmenting the happiness and the value of life to all people of all colors everywhere. During the first Lincoln Douglas debate on August 21, 1858, at Ottawa, Lincoln stated, "I have no purpose to introduce political or social equality between the white and black races. But I hold that there is no reason in the world why the Negro is not entitled to all the natural rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, to the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And at the Charleston debate in September 18, he stated, "I am not, nor have I ever been, of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. As long as blacks lived in America with whites, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race." These statements were all made in the environment preceding the Civil War. Before the 1854 Peoria speech, Lincoln's statements concerned abolition, not civil rights. And of course, Illinois opinion, even anti-slavery opinion, was against black voting. The issue was shaping opinion to end slavery, not obtaining political rights for blacks. First things first. But when he argued that the Constitution did not permit interference within the Southern states, as he pointed out, October 3, 1845, letter to Williamson Durley, that the use of the Constitution was a paramount duty due to the union of the states, and not because no one could think of an interpretation of the Constitution that would have permitted interference. In 1854, when he clearly stated that he did not mean to make blacks equals to whites, Lincoln was expressing the view that Lincoln, in 1854, when he clearly stated that he did not mean to make blacks equals to whites, Lincoln was expressing a view that became new Republican Party doctrine. In the aftermath of the Kansas-Nebraska Act repealing the Missouri Compromise, he always pointed out that he would not interfere with existing slavery and would uphold the fugitive slave laws, these being essential for the maintenance of the Union, but that Congress could, under Constitution, keep slavery out of the territories. He knew that free soilers and Republicans had to make clear over and over again that although they were against the extension of slavery, they were not radically for civil rights for blacks, nor attacking the South in order to win in Illinois. The wisdom of the view was confirmed in 1856. Anti-Nebraska Democrats led by Lyman Trumbull were forced out of their party and joined the Republicans for the election of 1856. As Lincoln reviewed the contest in Illinois, he believed John C. Fremont's problem was that the party still had to fight the notion that it believed in both civil equality for blacks and attacks on the South. Therefore, Buchanan could win. Buchanan did win not only Illinois, but Pennsylvania and Indiana, as Lincoln predicted, the anti-slavery vote was split between the radical Fremont and conservative Fillmore. But the Republicans had gained strength, carrying all but five of the free states. The results showed again, however, that in order to win, the Republicans needed the conservative vote in the northern states. They had to emphasize that anti-slavery did not mean Negro equality or the amalgamation of the races. When Stephen Douglas made a speech concerning the Dred Scott case, in which he implied that anyone who opposed the decision was in favor of blacks being political and social equals to whites, Lincoln responded. He explained that Republicans respect the courts but would seek to overturn the decision, mindful of the necessity for negotiating the idea that Republicans believed in mindful of the necessity for negating the idea that Republicans, that's what I meant, negating the idea that Republicans believe in Black equality or amalgamation. Lincoln stated that a Black woman had the natural right to eat bread she earned, but was not equal to him. He recognized that he recognized that his constituency had a natural disgust for amalgamation, and that the only way to prevent amalgamation was to oppose the spread of slavery and to propose the colonization of free Negroes. As he emphasized, the Declaration of Independence held out a promise for progress and improvement of mankind, but Blacks could achieve that promise in this country or elsewhere. Colonization was a way of gaining support for the Republicans' anti-slavery goals. Lincoln extended those views in the Lincoln-Douglas debate. To have to have done otherwise would have doomed the Republican Party to defeat again in the 1860 election. Lincoln was being both popular and political. He explained the party position in terms that appealed to his listeners and reflected their own views. But he proposed colonization as a way to set them thinking more positively about ending slavery. Lincoln's strategy proved its effectiveness when Hannibal Hamlin, on the ticket the Republicans attracted Illinois, Indiana, and Pennsylvania, won the election. When the Civil War came, we find further evidence that Lincoln was a pragmatic, successful politician. In a series of events, he gradually changed his posture towards civil rights for Negroes. As president, he moved to an emancipation policy in order to keep the border states in the Union. When circumstances led him to enlist Blacks, he found the authority for the action and the constitutional powers of commander in chief, recognizing the interpretation of Constitution can change with events. Therefore, measures otherwise unconstitutional might become lawful. He was no static dead hand view. He was his was no static dead hand view of the Constitution. The Constitution was a changing, evolving document yielding to necessity. When slavery was on the way to ultimate extinction, then he could deal with civil rights issues. One could speculate that Lincoln's final public statement in 1865, supporting suffrage for Blacks who served in the army, was made because he feared, as Benjamin Butler said, a race war, at least a guerrilla war, because we have taught those men how to fight. This, of course, is just speculation. We can, however, conclude, based on the pattern of his public statements, that Lincoln was flexible enough to change his political positions while remaining within the Constitution. His justification for Black soldiers and for emancipation itself then are evidence of his creative use of the Constitution. Lincoln and his advisors were very good lawyers. Perhaps a man with Lincoln's pragmatism and flexible posture, with the threat to Republican Party influence and the possibility of race war, would have supported the Civil Rights Act of 1866 as his party did. Perhaps he would have supported Negro citizenship and all other rights white citizens enjoyed. We should be mindful of Frederick Douglass's observation on the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln, in his peculiar, cautious, forbearing, and hesitating way, slow but sure, had emancipated slaves. Events, said Douglass, may be relied on to carry him forward in the same direction. And events after the proclamation did carry Lincoln forward in the same direction. Using Negroes as soldiers led logically, given the traditional association between citizenship and service, to permitting Negroes to vote. Justice Roger B. Taney had pointed out in the Dred Scott case that one of the reasons Negroes were not considered citizens was because they were not required to perform the highest duty to the state as participants in the armed forces. Once the first national draft was passed in 1863 and Blacks as well as whites were required to serve, the argument was gone forever. Lincoln's private and then public statements encouraging the vote for Black soldiers after the war showed his understanding and pragmatism on the issue. If Lincoln could respond positively within the Constitution when emancipation was necessary, he could respond if voting became necessary, especially was this given the constitutional nexus between military service and suffrage. The bottom line in any consideration of Lincoln, however, is this. There were certainly men and women who were more advanced in the civil rights actions and views than Lincoln's 1860 and 1864, but they could not be elected president. Perhaps the best way to be true to Abraham Lincoln's memory on his 171st birthday is to state, as the distinguished black historian Carter G. Woodson did in 1922, Lincoln, as president of the United States, could not carry out his own personal plans. In a situation like this, an executive must fail if he undertakes a reform so far ahead of the time that his coworkers cannot be depended upon to carry out his policies. As the experiment had not been made, the large majority of Americans of Lincoln's days believed that the two races could not dwell together on the basis of social and political equality. A militant minority of the descendants of those Americans did not believe it now. Do not believe it now. A militant minority of the descendants of those Americans do not believe it now. Militant being the key word there. The abolitionists themselves were not united on this point. Lincoln, moreover, gradually grew into the full stature of democracy. Men had been shown gradually the civil rights for Negro was a proper solution to the post-emancipation status of black soldiers. Lincoln moving into the full stature of democracy would have been to equal the task of generating that understanding. Now, these are just the notes. Back to this top of the page. Let me leave here. And stop sharing. I don't know why the whole thing was just messed up like that. I don't know why the video is not available. But yeah, however, so this is where I'm at. Y'all just got to hear the entire thing. Enemy of my enemy. And the reason why he's the enemy of my enemy, Abraham Lincoln, is because white people I don't think y'all understand how much white people actually hated Abraham Lincoln. Like, they hated him. It's because he had political savvy. It's because Abraham Lincoln actually wasn't afraid to put the hands on people. See, this is something that you would have to like read about the dude to like know that he was like actually like kind of rowdy. However, if I'm telling you right now, greeting sister, how you doing? If I'm telling you right now that Abe Lincoln, and this is before I get my day started, you know, because I got to roll out, but I had enough time to do that. This man, did y'all hear that? Now, you do understand the Civil Rights Act of 1866. That's what he proposed. Now, she didn't write that in there to make it seem like he was a real nigga lover. But understand, if this dude was telling you that he didn't believe that blacks were of any kind of equal status, and then he flip-flopped as fast as he possibly could, what does that say about him? You know, they have changed history for the betterment of their own minds. I cannot stress to you how many things in that article were absolutely amazing. They're absolutely amazing. I mean, they are just, oh my goodness, it's amazing. Because where do we get off? Where do we get off the gravy train? You know, where can I say to my people, all right, check this out. This is a dude that they will try to say is racist. Here it is written that he supported what would have been civil rights way back then. So you don't think amalgamation would have came naturally with that? The same amalgamation that came after Loving versus Virginia, 1967, and seeing an increase of almost sixfold in the increase of interracial marriage. You don't think that has anything to do with anything? You don't think it has anything to do with the fact that the Civil War killed off just about all the mixed race people? Killed off swaths of them. I mean, swaths of them got murdered. You don't think that has anything to do with that? Him being mixed race himself, him having mixed race children. This is urban legend now, because you can't even find it in books in the library. Urban legend says that the reason why Abraham Lincoln actually became a politician was because he had a half black son named Willie, not some little boy who died of typhus. and he was gunned down in his front yard. You'll never hear that story. I read this as a child. This book, you'll never find it in a library. I was 11 when I read this book. I'm 27 now. This is 16 years ago. They've had that many years to clean up after themselves. They don't want you to know the truth. They got people thinking that Frederick Douglass had a white daddy. Frederick Douglass was black. If you actually read, I read his biography as a child. If you read his biography, if he's really the son of the slave owner, why did the father get mad at his son being taught how to read by the white wife? That makes no kind of sense whatsoever. Take that shit somewhere else. Take that shit somewhere else. You can take that to the next nigga down the road. Abraham Lincoln did what, to me, what a smart mulatto would have done back then, which is play the game. He played the game. And won't none of y'all even admit that? Won't none of y'all even be like, you know what, bro did play the game. Bro did do that. Want to call him a fucking racist. The enemy of my enemy. That's who he is. He's the enemy of my enemy. Because my enemy is anybody who hates black people, for sure. Straight up. And he's the enemy of all those people. Want to know why? Because not only did he say, we're going to free blacks for the reason of not making them free because they need to be free, it's so that way we can avoid amalgamation. He's a play. That's a player move. Do you know what he did? That's the most gangster shit ever. He made them think that they didn't need something that they needed to keep in play. Slavery was not a dying animal. That is the biggest lie they can tell you. Is slavery's no longer here in that form and fashion, so they can say that. But that is the most bullshit I ever heard. I ain't never heard nothing so crazy. Slavery was not going to die on its own. Slavery was not going to die on its own. It was not going to die on its own. We would still be fucking slaves right now. We would still be slaves right now, minus the emancipation, minus all that. Okay. If there was no Civil War that actually just made the white man once again, when they see enough blood, they get weary and leery of it. You see what I'm saying? They get weary and leery. And they were already fighting the Civil War. Right. They were already fighting it. And so 2 years in, the emancipation happens, and now I get blacks fighting. Now, what the funniest part is that when you hear that part about the race war thing that it talks about, that's bullshit. Blacks have been doing, look, there were black Indian warriors in this country for thousands of years before the white man got here. Okay? They enlisted some of those same black Indians to help them fight in the Civil War. They can kiss my ass. All right? They're not going to tell me that. They can tell you that if you want to believe it. I would pray that you wouldn't believe it. But if you want to believe that, that's on you. The enemy of my enemy is that's all they are. And this man did for you. This dude took a bullet to the back of his head. I don't even think people even understand that. Like, when's the last time they got shot for black people? When's the last time somebody you know got killed for black people? Riddle me that. And then got called racist behind it. Riddle me that, Batman and Batwoman. Because that's crazy. He's a fucking racist, but they planted one in his noggin because he was supporting those civil rights. Once again, has nothing to do with foreign speculation. Not a damn thing. Nothing. Nothing to do with people from another country, from Spain or from France or anywhere in Europe or any of those places wanting to buy stuff. It has nothing to do with that. Not a damn thing. I would pray that you would see this. I would pray that you would acknowledge this and appreciate it. How you doing, sister? How you doing, sister? I'm good. I'm good. Greetings. But it's just one of those things. I had to read that article. You know, I had to. I'm getting tired of just hearing the stuff that I'm hearing from people's coming out of people's mouths. And then while I'm here, let me go ahead and hit one more thing real quick. The enemy of my enemy. They don't have to be a white person to be your enemy. Okay? They don't have to be somebody who does not. They can look just like you and be your enemy. Okay. The enemy of your enemy could be somebody who looks just like you, and it doesn't mean that they're your ally. Once again, a point to this is that got all these cats coming around lately trying to explain themselves about what they think or about what they feel about the word and the scripture. That's fine. I'm not saying I don't care what they think. I'm not inclined to listening to people, you know, who they don't have their own works put together, and yet they are disagreeing so vehemently. They're bringing up other people's facts and stats and things like that. I don't have time for that. I just don't have time for that. I have time for the right stuff. Let me approach this right here real quick, and then I'm about to be up out of here. If any of you have ever seen a Chinese person that was black, let me know. I'm talking about with nigga hair. You see what I'm saying? They can't just have dark skin. That's not enough for me. You see what I'm saying? Dark skin does not make you black to me. You see what I'm saying? I have I have I have features that support this. Well, thank you, sister. I'm always trying to help, trying to be supportive where I can. So if that's the case, if you know any black Chinese, hell, if you know any white black people who got nigga hair, nigga features, and they're white, for real, let me know. Let me point them out to me. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. That's not what I asked, sister. That's not what I asked. I said an actual black person who's Chinese, not somebody who's mixed. For one of the mixed person, I would ask for a mixed person. No, I've never seen one either. That's my point. They don't exist. White people with coarse hair don't exist. Mexicans with coarse hair, none of these motherfuckers exist. But I can go find black people who are black, who have two black parents, two black parents who have hair that fall down. And they'll tell you that their parents look like that. You understand? So it's not to be rude, but it's just because that doesn't happen. I have a hard time when brothers like Lamont Sims get upset because I say things like the Israelites are bearded. If that dude does not have a beard right now, at best, he's of stranger. He can want to be an Israelite, but how can you be something that you don't look like? It would be hard for me to tell y'all that I'm a true German dude. I have no German features. I'm not talking about the black Germans of old. No, I'm talking about a nowadays German. That would be some bullshit. That would be all out fuckery. So I'm not gonna sit here and act like when brothers or sisters say things that go against purely go against the logic of not only genetics, right? And the scripture is littered with genetic and biology. I can't stress it enough. Why would I entertain that? Why are you guys entertaining that kind of stuff from people? Before I roll out, somebody tell me, where in the scripture does it say Abraham comes from? What country is Abraham born in? And not by ethnicity, but by nationality. What is his nationality based on his place of birth? I'll wait. So when you hear another man say that he's not Chaldean, how is that possible? No, you're right. Yes, absolutely right. The Chaldeans. So once again, sister, when you hear somebody say he's not Chaldean, how is that possible? Tell me how. On just a nationality standpoint. I didn't say ethnicity. Just the nationality standpoint. How is that possible? Right. I know you're thinking. I know you're trying to find a way. It's not possible. Even though I don't identify as being American, even though I don't identify as being American, my nationality in this world, in this dispensation, is American, even though I don't identify. Doesn't matter what I don't identify as, because if I have to tell somebody what my nationality is, I have to tell them that I'm American. That's the only thing I can say to them that's going to make sense in this environment. So, once again, though, let's say they had a word for guys who left America in boats, and by boat in particular, not by plane, but by boat. Right. That's because you're right. Right. I understand that, sister. You're a Trinidadian. It's funny how it used to be. I want to say, was it Trinidad and Tobago? Now it's not. It's just Trinidad. I don't know why. I don't know why. But anyhow, it would be like just like that, sister. If you got in a boat right now, right? And bam, living from Trinidad, let's say that they had a word for people who left by boat and crossed over to a specific landmass, right? And that word doesn't mean anything good. It might mean traitor, for real, for real. Even though they say it means one who passes the river. Follow me. They don't think that there were Chaldeans who crossed the river Euphrates before Abraham and didn't come back? What? It didn't even make sense. It didn't even make sense. So when they say the term Hebrew, I always tell myself that this is for a person who stayed in the lands and never came back to Chaldea. That's just my opinion. That's my opinion. That's not a fact. There's just a lot of evidence to that. However, the enemy of your enemy, people. The enemy of your enemy. See, and you live in Trinidad. So look, I'm a prime example. The white people allowed the Chinese to wholesale move all into Trinidad. You got Chinese people who call themselves fucking Trinidadian. They ain't never been through the struggle that black people ever been through. And they've mistreated the black people just like the whites have. Ask me how I know. These are your enemies. But they're also the enemy of your primary enemy, who is the pale face, funny colored hair, funny colored eye person. We have two primary enemies. They're the without or the outside primary enemy. Our inside primary enemy are those who look like us and are not us. Let me acknowledge that. Let me not tell a lie. It's a blessing, y'all. It's a blessing. We are on the verge. We're right there. We're right there. Something big is about to happen. Something big is about to happen. I cannot stress what all this stuff means enough. They are your enemies. The enemy of my enemy is not my ally. They're not exactly my adversary either. They're an asset. You use the enemy of your enemy. Yeah, that's right. And the East Indians. And the East Indians. But you know what, though? Once again, sister, we're talking about Middle Earthers getting ready to get exposed on the highest level. What happens when people start to see that their lover is not exactly the people? Right on? Not the people that they thought to think they were. What happens then? See, the enemy of my enemy, you see. So, once again, our primary enemy, our inside enemy, they're the enemy of the white man also, our other primary enemy. So, a useful tactic is to pit them against one another. I'm not talking about sowing seeds of discord. Nay, but to pit them against one another. To make them fight one another. See, this is why the white man can't stand me. And if he could, he'd gun me down. But he's afraid to get gunned down himself. So this is what it is, y'all. You had better make a good decision. You had better make a wise decision. I'm 27. Most of y'all have lived more years on this earth than I have more experience in things, probably actually have more real world wisdom and a lot of senses and functionality. You'd be surprised. Um, I'm just willing to share what it is that I'm saying. Make them not trust each other. Why do you think I'm making the series The Sleeping with the Enemy? And I've taken my time, and there's only a couple pieces so far, but I will have a third piece by the end of this weekend and the start of next week. More than likely, it'll be the Sleeping with the Enemy, and it'll be the white and Hispanic and white and Asian and white and Islander. Uh, 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 and I will break down how even though these guys come from Middle Earth, they're not the same Middle Earthers. They don't have the same genus class as Middle Earthers, so therefore they're not the same. It's them sleeping with one another and making they make abominations too. All right. So they're already an abomination, and now they're going to make an even greater abomination amongst themselves. I go all in for two reasons. Two reasons I go all in. The first of which, nobody wants to say what it is that I'm saying. Second of which, it's easy. When I say it's easy to overlook all the hard stuff. So, and they'll sound the same, but they're not. Nobody wants to say it. Nobody wants to say, "Hey, you know what? Let me put myself on on the chopping block." They're safe. They're safe. They do safe things. They pick articles that they can talk about, that they can try to demonize people. These guys are safe. They're all inclusive. All black people are the same to them. Do I think that all dark skinned people um, with a certain type of features share a similar struggle? Of course I do, but I don't think they're all the same. And with that said, I mean that's the difference though, is that I can acknowledge these things without getting carried away with them and being all inclusive. I don't want everybody to be my friend. The Israelites had that issue. Everybody's not my people. It's just that freaking simple. You can't hack that? Get out of here. If you can, let's rock and let's ride. Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine, sister. Before it happens to me, it's gonna happen to them. Once again, before it happens to me, it's gonna happen to them. Y'all just have no idea the person who's talking to you. I just look like this, that's all. But when I tell you all that, I'm always careful. I'm always careful. I'm always cautious. But if you guys only knew who you were talking to, it would be a lot different. It would be much different. You would probably just want me to just stay calm and not lose my mind. But I'm not worried about these people. I don't worry about anything that they say or that they do. The enemy of my enemy is going to be the reason why we're able to walk away from all this. They're going to kill each other off. Not right away. Not right away, but they're going to kill each other off. Tis written. I have a question. Do you all honestly believe that none of these humans have any relation to the things that are within Middle Earth right now? You honestly believe that so-called humans, that's all of these so-called humans have no relations to them, have no connection to them still? Please, please, please. Once again, do you think there are people on this planet, or do you not think there are people who have still a viable connection to the things that are within the middle of the planet, biologically related to them and all? Some of them probably still have contact. I'm quite sure. We're not there with them, so there's no way to actually confirm these things. But however, though, close out on this note, y'all. We are going to make a break. We're going to make a break. It's not, there's no in between. There's no middle ground. There's no medium. Either we succeed or we fail. But look to find who are your enemies, and then look to find out who their enemies are and pit them against one another. And that's what you do. Abraham Lincoln attempted to do that and was almost very successful at it. It cost him his life in the last moments. At the ass end of everything, it cost him everything, cost him his life. So the enemy of your enemy is not always your ally, but they're not always your adversary either. Make them an asset. With that said, I thank you guys for your time. You have a blessed day, blessed week, and I'll be at it later.